Praise the Lord, everybody. It's good to be with you this morning. I'm glad you're here. And we'll get started here. I apologize for having my big laptop here. My preaching tablet is often shared by the family and for other purposes, and sometimes that means it finds its way places I don't know where it is, and I don't realize until I need it, and then I don't have it. And Jim, you could bring me down a little bit in the house. I think I'm echoing some. Did you? Okay, well, that's all right. I'll trust y'all. I just hear the ringing of the room. So, good morning. We will pick up with our series. We've been talking about building an intentional family culture. Last week, we kind of set the groundwork. Why would you want to do this? What does this even mean? I kind of put a phrase that hopefully frames it. Culture is created by what we consistently celebrate, tolerate, and model. I talked about the importance of having vision, direction, and purpose. Why we do what we do. Why? Where are we going? What's the reason that motivates who we are? Having values which govern how we pursue the vision, inform our priorities, and the choices we make kind of put boundaries, and this is the way we're going to accomplish the things that we feel like we want to accomplish. Habits that provide structure and reinforce those values. And then we talked some about the tone, the atmosphere we create, the way that we react to each other, the way that we talk to each other, the way that we kind of go about all these things, shaped by those, the way we speak, the way we touch each other. And that either undermines or establishes the vision, values, and habits. And I want us to remember we are disciples, and we're making disciples. And disciple, the same word as discipline. The goal here is to grow and to change, to be shaped, to be more like Jesus Christ. And our family is an incredible structure in which to do that. It's the way that God put people together to create new life and to grow and to discipline, to disciple people. The family structure is part of God's plan. So today and the next 2 weeks, I want to talk about a couple principles that I am recommending you culture into your family, that you adopt. As I mentioned last week, my goal isn't to tell you what to do or what to believe, but I hope to present some things from Scripture and some thoughts and hopefully walk through how can we, if you're convinced this is something that we should consider and be and do, how do we actually make that a part of our family culture? And this morning, I wanted to reflect on the fact that life is hard sometimes. Sometimes you go through seasons of difficulty, and it just seems like to do anything, you've got to push and persevere and deal with rejection and failure and try, and then it doesn't work, and then you try again, and it gets tiring, and sometimes you've got to pick up the heavy thing and carry it for a while, and sometimes you've got to move the thing that doesn't want to be moved. Jesus said that in this world we would have trouble, but that we should take heart because He's overcome the world. And so today, I want to encourage you that you can do hard things. And as a family, one of the things that our family has taken us as one of our family values, one of our family principles, is we can do hard things. And this is really an essential truth of Christian life and of a biblical worldview. There is trouble in this world, but we can overcome that trouble with God's help. In James chapter 1, Sarah, I'm going to pull up verse 2, and I'm going to read through, I'll just read verse 2 and verse 12, and then Sarah's helping me with Scripture today, so give her some grace. James 1:2, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. We love this verse. This is one that gives us encouragement and makes us feel very happy. Count it all joy, my brethren, when you meet trials of various kinds. In verse 12, he explains, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love Him. And then I'm going to go to Hebrews chapter 12. We'll read verses 1 through 5. But this is a common theme throughout Scripture, that things are not perfect, that we struggle against sin, we struggle under trial, we struggle just with the cares of this world. One of the consequences of the fall was that it was by our sweat we would earn our bread, that the very ground would no longer just yield fruit, but we'd have to work it. We'd have to struggle and toil. That's life. In Hebrews 12, the writer says, "Therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand on the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your blood." So the writer of Hebrews here is saying, look, Jesus is our example. We have to be prepared. And of course, he starts by saying, don't carry unnecessary baggage. There's going to be hard enough things. Don't let sin attach to you. Don't let things that are just going to weigh you down attach to you. We've got to run this race with endurance. We've got to persevere because Jesus did. He's our example. He had a reason, and because of the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despite what it cost him, despite the difficulty. And when we think about him, what he went through going up to the cross, what he went through on the cross, we shouldn't get tired. We shouldn't get weak and faint and feel like, oh, I just can't make it. I just can't go on. I don't have it within me. Consider Jesus Christ. If he was able to do that, if he was able to go to the cross for us, surely, I haven't shed blood in this pursuit yet. Right. Surely I have it within me to keep going a little more. Consider that. And I always want to be careful that we don't take scriptural principles out of context and just rob them of their spiritual meaning and make pithy aphorisms of them. But I think this principle does apply more generally than just resisting sin, just resisting temptation. It is a truth in this life that we're going to have to do hard things. And perseverance through hard things is rooted, number one, in our relationship with Jesus Christ. He gives us the power to go through things. He enables us to walk through difficulty and continue to move forward. So this is something that we've made part of our family. We can do hard things. Some of y'all have heard this conversation. I've had it with you. I've been struggling, or not struggling, it's wrong. I've been wrestling with this question for a long while, and I'm still turning it over in my mind. But the role of suffering in the life of a Christian. Because in many ways, suffering is a curse, but it also is a blessing. To briefly kind of catch you up to my train of thought, we know that in the garden, in the perfect world, there was no suffering. And we know that when we get to heaven, there's going to be no suffering. Right. So it doesn't seem like suffering is part of the perfect eternal will of God. However, in this middle time, suffering isn't purely an evil thing. I mean, we just heard from James. If you can pull up James chapter 1 again, we're going to read 2 through 4. He said to count it joy when you suffer trials. He said, you know, in verse 3, that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So suffering is part of how God creates steadfastness in us, and that perseverance and patience and willingness to keep going and endure is how we become completed in God. And this perfect here is not like holy. This is perfect as in not missing anything, whole, complete. So it seems like, despite suffering clearly being a result of sin, suffering is also essential to growth. Y'all, there's sayings like the obstacle is the way, right? The way through is don't just choose the easy path, right? Take the difficult road. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We have lots of ways to say this. Suffering, there's something about suffering that we need. And some of you may have heard this, but there's a University of Arizona, the University of Arizona. They run a lab that researches ecology, like the growth, plants, nature, earth. And they're running an experiment they called Biosphere 2. They took three acres of land, and they closed it in to make a closed ecosystem where nothing came in, nothing came out. It's a separate, its own thing. It was kind of a precursor to like, how would we create atmospheres in space if we colonized a planet, or just what does it look like to have a completely closed ecosystem? One of the things that they saw was that trees that they planted didn't face strong winds blowing against them. And so those trees that grew up without strong winds actually fell over before they got to maturity. They grew to a certain height, and then they just fell over without wind, without anything fighting against them. What they concluded was that the wind was essential to develop strong roots and to develop the tree, the way that the branches grow. A lot of the things that create strong wood are in response to the stress of wind. So if the trees don't have wind, not only are they not strong enough to stand up to the wind, they're not even strong enough to reach maturity if they don't have adversity causing them to develop that strength. They need resistance. They need something to push against to develop strength. And as I was refreshing this in my mind, I actually ran across a discussion, because that's, okay, great, they saw that in the lab. I ran across a discussion of a farmer who had planted, or he had a property and he cleared a number of acres just to make room for stuff he wanted to do. And what that meant was there was a forest that was previously sheltered that was now no longer directly sheltered from the wind. And he was questioning, he's like, every summer I find trees that have fallen over from this mature forest. And I'm guessing it's because it's no longer sheltered. And that was the conclusion of the arborists he was talking to, was the trees, even though they were strong enough to get to maturity, they'd never faced the kind of winds they are facing now, and they couldn't adapt. They didn't have the strength to stand within the hard wind. And this seems to be a recurring pattern. We could use example after example, right? A lot of us have things we've gone through that we are stronger because we went through the difficulty. Right. Even something as simple as getting physically stronger, you do so through resistance training. You do so by lifting heavy things, challenging the muscle till it breaks and has to repair itself stronger. So this is a natural, as far as we can tell, in our view of the world, this is part of how God made it. You have to struggle to develop strength. And so that puts us in a weird thing. Is suffering a good thing then? Should we seek suffering? Well, if we don't have challenge, we need challenge. We need it to some degree. And I think there's a middle way that the Bible teaches with kind of a ditch on either side. On the one hand, you have people that conclude suffering is a good thing, and we should seek out suffering. We should actively look for reasons to have hardship and difficulty. And even to the extent, some of you, if you know your history, it got to the point where you'd have some monks that their whole practice was in self-abuse, and they would purposely hurt themselves because they felt like that drew them closer to God because they were suffering. That doesn't seem wise. It doesn't seem biblical. Then you've got the other side where we just avoid suffering. Suffering hurts, it's hard, it's bad. So I'm going to, if it causes me to suffer, I'm going to go the other way. If it would lead me into difficulty, I'm going to look for the easier path. Why go through this difficulty? That also is clearly not biblical. So we can't run into suffering. We can't run away from suffering. So my conclusion thus far, and I'm sure this will be a conversation the Lord continues to have with me, and I'd love to have with y'all, is that we shouldn't do either. We shouldn't seek suffering, but we also shouldn't avoid it. We have to trust God, and if we have to suffer, we suffer well. And it's one of those things, in ministry, I'm very thankful in the States, at least to this point, we have peace, we have the rule of law, compared to some of our missionaries that have to suffer some incredible things. It's like, well, is that suffering required for revival? Lord, is that should we be suffering? Well, I'm going to trust Him. I'm going to trust Him. I don't know the appropriate amount of suffering for my life. Because the thing is, you require challenge to grow. But if it's too hard, it doesn't lead to growth. It just leads to trauma. We see that emotionally, we see that physically. If the weight's too heavy, you don't gain muscle, you injure yourself. If the circumstances are too painful, you don't grow through the pain, you end up with lasting scars and trauma. So I don't know the appropriate amount. I trust God. If you've ever heard me pray, you'll sometimes hear me say that, Lord, I trust you with my life, with my future. And that's a big part of, I'm reminding myself of this thing. Lord, I don't know what I need. I don't want to suffer, but I also don't want to lack strength. I'm trusting you that if I'm going through something, it's your will. I'm trusting your future. I trust that your plans are good for me. Right. And that makes me think about being a parent, because that's a lot of my job, is I try to put my kids in situations where they have to grow. That's not always fun, but this is very much, my wife and I were talking about helicopter parents the other day. I don't remember the context. But it's the danger, is that if I do everything for them, they never learn themselves. They never develop the skill themselves. But I don't want them to be hurt either. I've got to put them in a place that challenges but doesn't hurt. I trust God to do that for me. In Hebrews 5, verses 6 through 10, We read in James, he talked about suffering producing steadfastness, steadfastness leading to perfection. I thought this was interesting because in Hebrews 5, starting at let's go to verse 7 if we can. He said, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications. Sometimes this is confusing to us because Jesus is God. Why would he need to pray? But we have to recognize Jesus was God manifest in flesh. He was a man in every way just as we are. So, and that's, when we talk about the mystery of godliness, that's what Paul said the mystery was, that God became a man and was truly man and truly God. He didn't give up his divinity, but he became man so that he could sacrifice himself for us. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he was born, he was a man, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And I don't know, I never really connected this quite the way I did this morning when I was thinking about this again. You know, you read in Luke, it talks about Jesus being born, has the account, and then it says he grew up in grace and truth. So there's, again, this odd thing that Jesus is God, and you wonder, like, at one point, he knows everything. He's teaching when he's 12, he's teaching the rabbis, right? Explaining to them things that these learned masters don't know. But at the same time, he still had to grow up. He still had to go through all the human experience, because that's what it means to be a human. And so we know that Jesus was a man without sin. But you see here that in his humanity, even Jesus, the boy, had to learn obedience through suffering. That was curious to me. And being made perfect by what? The obedience that he learned through suffering. He became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Sometimes I think, we talk about following after Jesus, being like Jesus. And we emphasize that Jesus is God, and that's true. But it can make it feel like, well, it's not fair. He didn't really have to struggle the way I did. He didn't have to go through things the way I did. Of course, he got it right. He's God. Well, but he also, and I don't know how, he also was truly man. He had to go through all the same things. The writer also said he was tested in all ways like us, but without sin. Right. Suffering seems necessary. In 1 Peter, we have this, and then I'll kind of move on from suffering a little bit, and we'll bring it back into something more practical. 1 Peter chapter 2, I'm going to begin in verse 18. This is one of those passages of Scripture that challenges our culture, particularly when it's not biblical. Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. For this is a gracious thing, when, mindful of God, one endures sorrows while suffering unjustly. Again, our culture doesn't like that, because we don't want to be subject to any bad authority. I have a right. I have my rights. If they're mistreating me, I can go and that's. It's not saying that it's just. It's Peter's pointing out, yes, even when they're unjust, they're not righteous. This is not a good thing what they're doing. But if you're in that situation, if they have authority over you, you need to suffer well, be subject, even though you're in an unfair system. Doesn't mean that I can't try and fix the system, but I also don't rail and lambast and attack. Peter goes on. What credit is it when you sin and you're beaten for it if you endure? If you get thrown in jail and you did the crime, there's no credit for, that's just the consequences of your actions. But if when you do good and you suffer for it, you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you've been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. He had no cause to be punished or to suffer at the hands of men. And yet, when he was reviled, he didn't revile in turn. When he suffered, he didn't threaten, but continued entrusting himself, to him who judges justly. So this brings us back to that tension, because Peter is calling us to obey authorities over us, even if they're unjust. I mean, the example here is a servant obeying a master, which is, we immediately recoil, and understandably. But if we have to be subject, then we should suffer according. When God says, if we are under authority, an unjust authority, and we suffer mindful of God, Peter says is a gracious thing in the sight of God. So I don't think God is pleased by the injustice of the master or of the authority, but he's also not displeased if we then use that as a reason to be unchristian. And he gives Jesus the example. And again, it points to where I'm kind of landing. Jesus didn't say, oh, this is good that I'm being treated this way. But neither did he go on the attack and try and tear down those who were treating him. But he trusted the one who judges justly. This authority over me is not just. These people are not treating me justly, but God is still just. And so I'm going to trust him, even if I have to go through unfair treatment. But I also want to point out, Peter said, there's no credit if you sin and you suffer because of that, right? And I think this is worth pulling out as well, because it's similar, suffering and difficulty are similar in this regard. Just because it's suffering doesn't mean we seek it. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's worth doing. Just because it's easy doesn't mean it's the right way either. Right. But in fact, whether it's hard or difficult isn't really the issue. Right. The issue is it the right thing to do? Right. I was talking to Brother Ferguson, who's in Liberty Hill, and he was talking about, he'd read a book that mentioned the phrase that the hard way, you should always take the hard way. If you have two choices, one's easy, one's hard, you should take the harder one. And he was kind of turning that over in his head and trying to think it through. And it resonated because I've been preparing for this. I don't think that's true. I don't think you can categorically say if it's hard, that's the better route. I'll use a short example and then I'll move on. Many of y'all know I started a business with a business partner a couple years back, and in any new venture, there's tons of challenges and hurdles, right? There's lots of scenarios where it's tempting to take the easy way, just to cut the corner, don't do the hard work. If we can get it done this way and just get it out, then that seems tempting. But a lot of times that cutting the corners, taking the easy route, it's easy now, but worse later. It leads to worse outcomes. We're not actually going to succeed as a business. We're going to end up failing. But there's also lots of things I could have done to make it even harder, right? I'm already doing a hard thing. There's no reason to go and needlessly add difficulty. I'll give you an example. How many of you have email addresses? How many of you run your own email servers? Right. Same thing with a business. We have a business address, but I don't run and I could say we need to have our own emails, we need to do all this infrastructure ourselves. But that's needlessly difficult. Someone else can do that for me, and that can take something off my plate. I wouldn't say, I should do that because it's hard, right? I can always add difficulty. But adding difficulty is not necessarily wise. Proverbs 13:15 says, good sense wins favor, but the way of the treacherous is their ruin. Proverbs 27:12, the prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. So, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's the right thing. Just because it's easy doesn't mean it's the right thing either. We should be willing to go through suffering, and we should be willing to do hard things. I think this is a core part of being a Christian. So how do we actually make this part of our family culture, assuming I've convinced you this is something that is worth teaching, is worth building in yourself? So last week I talked about celebrating things, tolerating or not tolerating things, and modeling as tools to create culture. And I want to give you three more this week, and that is the value of having a mantra. It's an odd phrase because I think, just growing up, mantras to me were things that yogis did or something. They had these things they'd repeat, and it was a weird thing. But as I've gotten older, I found that, this is what I'm doing. It is a mantra is just a short, concise version of something that can be repeated and remembered. An easy way to call to mind a broader subject. So there's this whole discourse on suffering that we just went through. And I need an easy way to bring that back to my memory and just keep it in mind. A mantra is good for that. It's just a short phrase. I've said the one that's relevant for this that we use in our family quite often. We can do hard things. Sometimes we'll be going through something and we're frustrated or upset about it, and it's just or the kids come to us and say, I don't like this subject right now. The way it's being taught is horrible, and just all the problems, right? School's worthless. I know it's difficult, but we can do hard things.
Right.
This is what we as a family, we can do hard things. It just creates a way for you to easily bring back the mind. There's nothing magical about having words that you repeat. And I think that's where sometimes we fall into mistakes. It's not an incantation, it's just a remembrance for us. Create mantras that will help you to recall the broader conversation. Mantra, practice, and teaching. Practice seems obvious, but oftentimes we don't do it intentionally. If we want to learn something, we have to put ourselves in situations where we have to exhibit the desired behavior, right? And if I'm teaching myself, if I'm teaching my children, if I'm trying to teach somebody else, I have to be careful to not take them out of the hard situation before they've learned something. And personally, what that means is sometimes I'm facing a problem and it's frustrating or difficult or painful and I don't want to do it. And I can find a way out, and that's where that easy path seems seductive, but it's like, no, I need this. This is important. I'm going to stick in it until I learn this. Same thing with my children. Sometimes it's easy to see your children struggling with something, or friendships are a great example of this. They have a friend and they're it's not going well, and the relationship is rocky, and the friend does something mean, and they're rude, and part of me as the parent wants to go in and fix them and tell that friend, or go to their parents and tell them, you need to tell them, do this. But I also kind of just have to let them negotiate. Like when you get to be an adult, you're going to have coworkers that are rude and mean, and ideally you'd want to learn how to stay friendly even when they're prickly sometimes. And recognize, okay, they were a jerk because they're hungry, or whatever. Like I can navigate this. But they don't get that if they don't ever practice. And then teaching. Practice is essential, but it's not always precise. I remember coaching when my kids were little. I coached them in soccer. Now, I'm not a fantastic soccer player, but I felt like I could at least get toddlers a step forward. I could do a little bit. Exactly. Go towards that one. How many times? No, that's the other goal. That's the other goal. But I don't remember who I was having a conversation with about. They were I think it was a colleague, and they were arguing against formal education or against structured education. They were saying you just need to learn through experience. And I was like, yeah, you do have to have learning. But if I just throw those 4-year-olds, I guess they're a little older than toddlers, but not a lot. If I throw those 4- and 5-year-olds onto the field and say, go play soccer, well, I mean, it's going to be chaos even if I explain the rules and I tell them what to do. But if I just let them go, it's just mayhem. I mean, they may have fun, and that's good. That's one of the main goals. But if I'm trying to teach them soccer, they need some instruction. And it's obvious when you put it in that context, but a lot of times we don't think about it in the context of the rest of our life. Sometimes we go through stuff and we deal with it. You need to take a stop after you've gone through practice or even just gone through a situation that stretched you and think and evaluate. How did that go? What could I do better? Which part of this was the right thing? Which part of this did I do that could have been done or better? For me, it makes me think of playing instruments again because I learned trumpet with a teacher, and then I learned bass on my own. And after I played bass for a couple years, I then went to a teacher, and they helped me play. And then piano, I just learned on my own, so that's why it's the way it is. But whether it's good or bad, that's why it's the way it is. But I remember one of the things that was so valuable about having a teacher is the teacher gives you something to develop you, and they require you to go and do this. And then you do it, and then a good teacher will have you come back and do it again. Well, like, show me what you did. Well, I just practiced this for all week, and you want me to do it again? Yeah, show me what you did. Okay, I'm going to do it for you. And he says, okay, great, look here. When you do this there, the way you're bending your wrist, if you keep playing like that, it's going to cause injury. So you need to straighten out and do it this way, right? This is true of a lot of things. When we do hard things, and I'm blurring up my notes a little bit, but because this principle applies to everything, not just this one, but I'm talking about this one, so I'll do this one. When we do hard things, when we're learning something, we get it done. We figure it out. We find a way. We succeeded. Good job. But if we just keep going, we might have bad habits. We might be doing it ways that are counter to our long-term goals or counter to health. Again, lifting weights seems like a good example. When you're young and in your 20s, you can get the weight up any way you want to, and your muscles are going to get stronger, and you're probably fine. But if you don't have someone to stop and say, hey, if you keep lifting it that way, you're going to hurt yourself. Then someday you're going to get into your 30s, and or your 40s, and you're going to go lift that weight again, and you're going to pull your back out because you never learned to lift it properly. So practice and teaching are separate things. And you need to follow up practice with teaching so that you ingrain good habits and don't ingrain bad ones. How do we do this with hard work specifically? Well, I want to take you back. The first thing you do is you cast vision. You explain to yourself, to your family, to your children, why. Why should we be willing to do hard things? If that's something we're adopting as a family, I don't know, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here and all of y'all you know this better than I do and you can come up here. But life will be hard at times, but we can do hard things. Yep. If we don't learn to do hard things, we're closing off potential. We are closing doors that we will never be able to open. I can't do math. No, math might be harder for you than it is for other people, but you can do it. It might take time, it might take effort, but you can do it. And if you don't learn to do it, there are some careers you just can't even consider. I want to be an astronaut. Not if you don't learn math. I want to be an engineer. Not if you don't learn math. I just can't memorize things. I know this one because my memory is, I always say it's horrible. It's not horrible, it's selective. And I don't always get to choose. When it's, my wife this morning we had every day. I just can't memorize things. I hate history. I have to memorize, and I'm horrible at memorization. Maybe it's hard for you, but you can do it. Right. And if you don't learn the skill of being able to memorize things, there are some whole paths in life that are just going to be closed to you. No, memorization is the bedrock for expertise. You often don't understand until you've just got enough stuff in your head to start making connections. A lot of careers, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to go through, there's all sorts of ways through life. If you decide this is too hard, you've just shut that whole door. Learning to do hard things builds capacity. I can look at the mountain and say, I can climb that. It may not be easy, but I can do it. I may have to figure things out, but I know I can do it. And I'm doing this for you, but this is what we should, when we teach our children, when we encourage ourselves. Don't you want to be the kind of person that can look at the mountain and say, yeah, I could do that. I can figure it out. I'm not saying it'd be easy, but I can figure it out. Rather than the person who says, nope, can't do that. Nope, can't go there, too hard. Nope, can't do that. So yes, we want to be able to do hard things. You can't have a can-do attitude if you aren't able to do hard things. Right. I can do it. As long as it doesn't get too hard, I can do it. No, I can do it. I know there's going to be difficulties. I'm not saying it's just going to be easy, but I can do hard things. We can do hard things. Like we talked about with the trees, learning to do hard things builds resiliency. I know I can do hard things. I'm convinced of it. So if I fail, or if it's more difficult than I thought, I'm not discouraged. I can just say, okay, that's okay. I'll figure it out because I know I can do hard things. It changes some things, right? When I have that conviction that we can do hard things, we have the capacity, we're able, it's not going to stop us. Then, if I'm having a really bad day, it's not, oh, this is the worst day ever. I can't believe this day. No, it's just Tuesday. Yeah, it's a hard day, but so was last Tuesday. Or, I know tomorrow's going to be easier, or it will get easier. It's just today's hard, but that's fine. It's not a big deal. I can do it because I'm convinced I can do hard things. This is the vision that I want to cast to my family, that I want to impart in my own heart. I want to be that person. I want to be the person that can do things. I want to be the person that's not afraid to get up and to try because I'm convinced. I don't care if it's difficult. I can still do it. I might struggle, but I'm willing to struggle. I might fail and have to try again, but I'm willing to do that because I can do hard things. Cast the vision. It's worth it. It's important. It's who we want to be. We talked about celebrating. How many of you have in either your jobs or somewhere you've heard the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset? It's fairly commonly taught. I know a teacher is going to have heard this. Willingness to do hard things is a huge part of having a growth mindset. Because a fixed mindset says, this is who I am, this is who I will be, what I'm good at, I'm good at, what I'm not good at, I'm not good at. It just is. A growth mindset says, I can change, I can become more, I can learn. But that requires me to be willing to do things I'm not good at, to go through things that I'm going to struggle with. And one of the pieces of advice that came out of the research around this is that we should praise effort and not intelligence. Right? We shouldn't say, oh, you're so smart, you're so brilliant. you should say, oh, you did such a good job. You tried so hard. And personally, I think we should praise both. But I respect the point of this, is that if we praise intelligence and not effort, we actually train children to be scared of failure because it shows them, like it's proof that they're wrong. Well, if I fail on that test, I must not be as smart as everybody tells me I am. So I shy away from hard things because I don't want to accidentally prove that I'm not as smart as people say I am. My self-worth is attached to my brilliance. Whereas if I teach them to work hard, then whether I succeed or not, I can at least I can say, yes, I did my best. I tried. And if I do both, let me put it this way, and you can tell me if this matches your experience. That the person with a strong work ethic will catch up and surpass the more talented person every time. The person with the stronger work ethic will catch up and surpass the more talented person. I play a number of instruments, and I sometimes get that, wow, you're really talented. Like, God's amazing, God gave you that gift. He did, but like I've spent 10 years learning to play the trumpet. I spent 20-something years learning to play the bass. I've spent, off and on, 10 years playing piano. For 10 years, I feel like my piano playing could be a lot better. I don't feel like I'm particularly talented. I feel like I've just worked hard. And God has blessed me, and He has given me gifts. But what a lot of people see as talent is just hard work. So we should celebrate that hard work. Notice and celebrate when we do hard things. Sometimes we're bad about this, especially for ourselves. For our kids, it's sometimes easier. Like we see they really, really tried, and they really put their whole effort to it, and we praise them. But when it's on ourselves, and someone says, wow, like you did a really good job. No, it's just my job. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. It's not a big deal. We, self-deprecate. And I understand that. On the other side, I don't want to get a big head. I don't want to be arrogant. I'm just me. But internally, I should congratulate myself. That was well done. I'm glad I did that. Celebrate when you work hard. Celebrate when you try and you put in a hard effort and you struggle and fail. Don't make that a point of, don't turn that failure into a reason to not celebrate. It's okay. I've learned some good things. I've figured out what doesn't work. I know a way that I can't go. I'm going to try again when I'm ready because I can do hard things. I failed this time, but I'm going to do it again. Tolerating. Tolerating and what we don't tolerate. If we want to teach our children, if we want to teach ourselves, if we want to have a culture of hard work and of being willing to do hard things, we have to tolerate failure. This one is one that boggles my mind for companies. I don't know if this happened to you. One of the places I was a manager, and on the one hand, we were setting goals and objectives, right? And I got feedback from my manager. You really ought to set more ambitious goals and objectives. If you're achieving all your goals, that means you're not trying hard enough. You should be stretching so that, I expect to see maybe 80 or 90% of what you say you're going to do, you actually are able to accomplish. Because if you're not missing the mark on a couple of these, it means you're not really pushing yourself. You're being too safe. And we want a high-performance culture. Great. But then, a couple months later, when one of the projects we were working on was a little bit late, come down hard on why was this late? What could we have done to make this late? We can't accept things being late. We can't accept. I was like, well, we finished. We got everything done that needed to be done. We accommodated unforeseen problems. We just delivered it a couple weeks late. These two things are in conflict. Right. If you want me to set ambitious goals that I'm going to have to stretch myself to meet, you have to tolerate when I don't hit all the goals. Right. Because what you say you want me to work hard and to push myself, but you reward when I play it safe and I always deliver consistently. So if we want to really enculture this idea of hard working with our children, we have to be willing to tolerate failure. Now, what I don't tolerate is laziness. What I don't tolerate is avoidance. Now, if it's hard and I'm just avoiding it because it's hard, that doesn't, that I don't tolerate. We're going to give it a shot, even if it's difficult. But if you try and you fail, that's something I'm going to tolerate. Tolerate wise effort that falls short. Tolerate rest. Tolerate patience. Tolerate recovery. If we're really pushing hard, there's got to be times where we back off and we recover and we rest and we recharge so we can push hard again. don't tolerate, like I said, laziness. I don't tolerate giving up. I don't tolerate excuses. It's too hard is not a valid word in our house. It's too hard gets my attention quick. Okay, what's too hard? What are we avoiding? It makes me think of my wife. The one that gets her attention is, I'm bored. Oh, you're bored. I've got chores. I've got things for you to do. We can fix that. It's too hard. Oh, it is. Well, I can help you with that. What do we tolerate? Model. I won't spend too much time on this one. Model doing hard things. You've got to do it yourself. If you want to teach your children, if you want it to be a habit that you as a family have, you've got to model failure. You've got to try. You've got to be willing to back off and recover. Be persistent. The mantra, we can do hard things. Phrase it how you want. If this is something you want to adopt, that's the one we've used. We can do hard things. Practice. Often we have to be intentional, as I mentioned, about creating scenarios for ourselves, for our children, that give the opportunity to practice these things. But one of the great things about the virtue of perseverance and persistence and the willingness to go through is that rarely do we have to create the opportunities. The opportunities present themselves naturally all the time. What we do have to do is we have to notice them and take advantage of them. And that's important. We need to be intentional. So notice when you're struggling. Sometimes it's good to take a step back and reframe your emotions. I'm getting really frustrated. I'm beating my head against the wall. I'm getting mad. Okay, hold on a second. I'm getting frustrated because this is frustrating, because this is hard, because I've tried a couple times now and I still can't quite get it right. That's why I'm frustrated. Okay, I understand. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to come back at it. This is just a hard thing, but I can do hard things. This is a chance for me to build that. Help your children notice when they're struggling. Help them frame their own emotions. Teach them to do that thing. Okay, what's going on here? Well, I just keep trying and I keep failing, or it's so frustrating. Okay, hold on, let's take a break. What's happening? Oh, you're doing this. Well, this is hard. Let me show you how to do it. Not, well, let's just make it easier. Let's go away. Practice. And it's okay. One of the possible outcomes is I take a step back and I try a different approach. You know what? Actually, I realize I'm doing this the hard way, and there's an easier way to do this. Well, does this accomplish the same goal? Is it going to get us where we need to go? Is it cutting corners that we need to not cut? Or is it just, this is a better way to do it? It's okay to say, okay, I'm going to take a different approach. That's not giving up. I'm just taking a different tack. But I'm not going to give up and put my hands in the air and say, oh, it just doesn't happen. No, we're going to solve this. Teach. Take that time to think through. What did we accomplish? What came out of this? Was it worth it? Sometimes the answer is no, right? And that's worth learning too. Like, I spent all this time and energy on trying to make this thing happen, and I made it happen. And in the end, it didn't matter. I could have spent the time over here instead. This was not important. Okay, that's a valuable lesson too, but you don't get that lesson unless you're willing to try at things. On the other hand, a lot of times what we'll find out is, yeah, it was worth it. I wouldn't have built this character in myself if I hadn't done that. I wouldn't have accomplished this thing on my career if I hadn't done that. How did it feel? Were the feelings useful? Well, I was really frustrated. Okay, but what happened as you did it? Did the feelings go away? Yeah. How did you feel when you finished it? Well, I found great. Could you have made it easier? And I know we're getting to the end, so I'll add one other thing here. Because the goal of this is to put this mindset in myself, which you find all through Scripture, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I'm not afraid of a challenge. I'm not afraid to pick up the hard thing. I'm not afraid to move forward. I'm not afraid if I have to suffer. I can do the hard things. And as we touched on in the portion on suffering, a lot of times it's not fair. I shouldn't have to do what I have to do. There's a story of Amelia Earhart. Everyone's familiar. First woman, I think, if I remember correctly, not just the first woman, she was the first person to do some of the things that she did. But she always wanted to fly. They wouldn't let her. She ended up having to get a job not related to flying because no one would let her pilot a plane, because women's suffrage has only been 10 years old by that point. No one's going to give her the chance. finally someone called and said, hey, we'll let you be the first woman to fly a plane. I forget exactly, it's across some distance. But the caveat is you're not actually going to get to fly. There's 2 men that are going to fly, and you're just going to be on the plane. And we're not going to pay you. They're going to get paid, but you're not going to pay you. But if you want to come, and we'll let you be the first woman. Now, no, I'm not interested. Immediately I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. Because of that, she got more opportunities. And eventually she was the first person to complete a number of flights, solo flights on her own. But what she was willing to say was, what's my goal? Where am I trying to go? And this is a frankly offensive offer. But this might be a crack in the door, and I can get my foot in and push my way a little bit in further. And this goal is worth it. I can put up with these people if it gets me where I need to go. I'm not saying we compromise our values, but sometimes we look at difficulty and we look at unfairness, and our conclusion is, well, we should make it easier. Well, if it's too hard, we should make it easier. And there is some truth in that. In education, this idea is called scaffolding. I need to seek the thing that's a stretch, but it's within reach. And I've got to build scaffolding so I can reach up there. If it's too far, I'm not going to learn anything. It's going to be a waste of time. But in real life, you can't always make things easier. Real life is what it is. If I want to swim across a river, that river is not going to get shorter. The current's not going to get less. It just is what it is. If I'm going to build a building, the loads aren't going to change. The material it just is what it is. I can't make it easier. So when we're faced with something that's too hard, if it's just really too hard, one option is, okay, I'm just going to come back later. I can't do that right now. Let me go do some other things that are also hard but within reach, but I'm going to come back to this when I'm stronger. That's one path. We don't make that easier. Another thing we can do is, which is related, we don't make the thing easier, we make the person stronger. So I'll give you the example of my daughter. Our daughter, Adele, she wouldn't mind me sharing this story because she shared it herself. She's an excellent reader. She devours books. There's a book that she and I read that every time the author's writing it chapter by chapter. And every time a new chapter comes out, she's there reading it, and I'm there reading it. We're comparing notes, and she loves reading. She wants to write. She's written a couple of her own books. She has dyslexia, which, for those of you in education, you know, that causes difficulty reading. It causes difficulty writing. It'd be very easy for her to say, I've got dyslexia. I don't want to read. Let me find other things, but don't make me read. Well, she could do that. But what my wife did was said, no, this is a difficulty you have. I'm not going to pretend like you don't. But let's find things that help. Let's find coping mechanisms. Let's find other ways to approach it so that you can still do the thing. So just because if something's too hard, we don't make the thing easier, we make ourselves stronger. Whether going through other things that give us practice and increase our capacity, or whether we bring in assistive technology, other ways of doing it that can be more effective, man is a tool making, that's what we do. We build tools. Build a tool. Find a way. But I'm not going to shy away from the hard thing, because the value I'm trying to teach myself, teach my family, teach my children is we can do hard things. Because we are tough. We're not rough. We're gentle. But we are tough. And we're going to do the right thing. Whether it's hard or easy, that doesn't matter. I'm not seeking the hard thing just because it's hard and I'm just going to go through it for the sake of suffering. No, but I'm also not going to shy away from hard things and avoid suffering. I'm going to do what God's told me to do. I'm going to do what's right, whether it's hard or not. Because we can do hard things. So just because it's hard, not a big deal. And we know there will be hard times. But I'm going to persevere. I'm going to thrive through the hard things. The hard things are going to make it difficult for everybody else, but I'm used to doing hard things. So I'm going to come out of this ahead because we can do hard things. I'm not the victim of hardship. If I'm going through unjust suffering, I'm going to trust the one who is just, that he's bringing me through this, and he's going to strengthen me and form me and use this hardship to make me who he wants me to be. In 1 Peter 5, verse 10, Peter said this, "After you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you into his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you." So I submit to you this morning, if you're trying to build a family culture, one of the values that you should include in that culture is we can do hard things. Praise the Lord. I hope this has been useful. We will transition here and we'll go into our main service. God bless you, and praise the Lord.